right. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I'm Lucian Fogoros. I'm your host for today, and welcome to IoT World's Manufacturing and Supply Chain Day. Before we get started, I wanted to just make sure you are aware of a couple of things, that all of the experts today, over 40 speakers, are live. As such, I encourage you to ask the questions. We track all the questions in the Q&A, so the commitment to you, they would answer all the questions, even though we only have 1 hour for this session or for each of the sessions throughout the next couple of days. So post your question in the Q&A. That's where we track them. Certainly, you can leverage chat to let us know what interesting AI projects you may be working in manufacturing, what other topics we could add to this type of session that we run every other day. I'd like to thank the speakers. I'd like to thank the sponsor for this session, Infinite Uptime, for their generosity with their time, as well as supporting us to make this event possible. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce the moderator for the session, the Chief Operating Officer of Magnet, and he'll tell you all about it, Michael O'Donnell, which joins us from the heart of U.S. manufacturing, the Cleveland, Ohio office.
Thank you very much, Lucian. My name is Mike O'Donnell. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Magnet, and we are a not-for-profit consultancy, and our area of service is Ohio. And we deal exclusively with small to middle-sized manufacturers, about 150 a year, and about half our work is in technology, including AI. This is a very exciting topic, and I would share with the group that smaller manufacturers have more challenges implementing AI than larger organizations, and this panel will shed a lot of light on that throughout all sizes of companies. So first off, we'd like to have some introductions so you'll get to know our speakers. I'll call them out in order, and if you could give just your name and sort of a little bit of a background on yourself, and we'll begin with Carl. If you could sort of start and introduce yourself.
Sure. Good morning, good day, everyone. My name is Carl March, and I'm a transformation architect at EY. I am a mechanical reliability automotive systems engineer by training, and my background is I have a background of almost 3 decades in and serving manufacturing of all sizes across multiple industry sectors, including oil and gas, chemicals, mining, utilities, consumer packaged goods, as well as advanced industries such as aerospace and automotive. In my current role, I work with manufacturers to assess their current state with respect to systems, technology, data, and then help them develop and execute a roadmap to realize a value-focused vision that they have. So happy to be a part of this esteemed panel on this topic.
Thank you, Carl. Secondly, Jeff, if you could do the same.
Sure. My name is Jeff Winter, and I am the Vice President of Business Strategy at Critical Manufacturing, which is an innovative MES software company. And it's my role there to help lead our company in kind of our growth trajectory. And in order to be successful at that, I have to be intimately involved in the industry, which is why I participate in so many industry groups, associations, advisory boards, academic teams, research teams, so that I can stay current on the latest and greatest and kind of use that information to help guide my company. And then most people know me as the poster on LinkedIn, because I like to share a lot of stuff I learn with the world so that everyone gets to benefit.
Thank you, Jeff. And I would second what I just heard from Jeff, because we were chatting before this, and I personally have benefited in our organization in Northeast Ohio from the information which comes out from these panelists. Thank you so much for posting. Lastly, Karthik.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining this event. I'm Karthik. I'm CEO of Infinite Uptime, which is a prescriptive AI platform company helping customers to improve their availability of equipments and process. And we have been in the business for close to 7 years, and I'll talk about more in the next few minutes. I've been in the industry for more than 3 decades and helped to set up an Internet of Things, Industry 4.0 centers for Fortune 500 clients. And I'm a certified reliability expert as well as Master Black Belt in Six Sigma. And happy to be part of this session. And thanks, Lucian, for setting this up.
Thank you, everyone, for your introduction. So we're going to pivot sort of into the first area of discussion, and that is that there's probably many perceptions of what AI is, ranging from robots that can talk in the very far future, but more grounded, like today. What is really industrial AI, and some concrete use cases of what is really occurring in industry, either large or small companies. So with that, I'm gonna start with Karthik and say, maybe kick us off and talk about some cases that you're aware of, and if possible, even take that into how we can improve reliability, asset health, and other things that are great benefits in industry.
Sure. Thanks, Michael, for having this question to start off. See, industrial AI is an application of how do we apply AI combined with physics-based models and real-time operational data to autonomously optimize, predict, and control physical industrial systems across safety, reliability, productivity, quality, energy. A closed loop, a self-learning system that can predict failures and prescribe actions and verifies the outcomes across the industrial assets to maximize the uptime and asset life. And just to go deeper, it starts with advanced sensing that can capture high quality raw data that powers integrated real-time dashboards, a layered intelligence stack combining physics-based anomaly detection, predictive and prescriptive analytics with LLM-enabled AI, prioritize the actions in a term that I would call it as an explainable AI, with expert validations through a center of excellence, along with a trust feedback loop with customers. It makes this a proposition for manufacturers and plants to start looking at it. If I were to give you a view of what we have been able to do in the last 5, 7 years, we have digitized about 25,000 assets. We have sent about 35,000 recommendations. And the most important thing is 96% of these prescriptions have been acknowledged by the customer, saying they are useful prescriptions they need to act upon. We had been able to save about 125,000 hours of downtime, which could have been avoided through our intelligent recommendations. And this is really making reliability as a service with the production outcome. I think this is something which we have not seen in the last couple of decades. While IoT is not new, Industry 4.0 has been there for more than a decade. I think the power of computing along with AI at edge makes this proposition very compelling.
Thank you. You gave some great examples on application in the factory environment. Pivoting a little to Jeff, as we think about the AI, how does industrial AI, sort of what Karthik talked about, differ, or is it the same as consumer AI? And what trends do you see and initiatives that impact this transformation?
So this is a great question, and I like it because I get asked all the time, and think about it from my personal side, because everyone here, I mean, everyone uses AI at some level or another. And what is the real difference? So I put together what I think are like 4 major differences that make industrial AI fundamentally more difficult than the AI we experience in everyday life. I'll call that like commercial AI. So the first is the environment is just far more complex. Consumer AI or commercial AI, it lives in a relatively homogeneous settings. You have your photos, you have your texts, you have your messages, even just clicks. And industrial AI operates in a heterogeneous, constantly changing environment where things like temperature, materials, tolerances, machine states, quality thresholds, they vary not just between factories, but even between shifts. So a model that works in plant A often fails in plant B without major retuning. The second is the accuracy demands are exponentially higher. So consumer AI or commercial AI can be good enough at like 95 to 98% accuracy. Think about what ChatGPT spits back, or if you use Sora 2, the video engine, if it just looks pretty darn good, or it gets a pretty darn good answer, everyone's usually pretty happy. But on the shop floor, mistakes mean scrap. They mean downtime, or even worse, safety risks or regulatory issues. So models must perform often at 99.5% or higher. there's almost no margin for error, and that makes it significantly more difficult. The third is security and privacy stakes. They're just dramatically higher. Consumer AI handles personal data. Industrial AI handles recipes, yields, process data, and critical infrastructure. So companies must meet standards, strict standards, anything from ISO 27001 to different NIST standards, and even have to clarify how they're meeting regulations like GDPR just for any information that they're using, because you getting a little personal information out is a lot different than a company getting some of their information out. And last, I would say, is scalability. It's harder. It's slower. Consumer AI scales instantly to millions of users. Industrial AI typically requires asset and plant-specific tuning. It deals with smaller data sets, especially failure data, and often relies on on-premise systems with limited interoperability. So I'd say it's these four differences that make industrial AI a completely different discipline. And it's more demanding, it's less forgiving, and it's far more context dependent.
Thank you. You've definitely outlined how the operations and manufacturing is more complex and precise. Pivoting to Carl, with AI in this context that was just described, and now thinking about the smaller and medium-sized manufacturers and what we've been talking about, how are they applying AI, and how is that changing? I know they've started a little slower than the larger companies, and so if you could comment on how that is changing with small manufacturers.
Yeah, great question, Michael. So even just piggybacking on where Jeff left off in terms of the differences between consumer/commercial and industrial AI. When we're talking about industrial AI, we're referring to that application of the AI technologies on the shop floor in the manufacturing environment. But I also say even a bit broader across the supply chain for manufacturing, right? And it's not just about automation. It's about creating systems that learn from the data and continuously improve outcomes. Now, as was alluded to by Jeff, is that, as a part of those requirements, as a business, unlike consumer, you have to be value focused. So small and medium-sized manufacturers, they tend to be very value focused based on just the way they operate, right? But we found that AI is still being applied in some practical ways that can still scale very well. Now, examples may include predictive maintenance, as many people talk about, to reduce downtime, quality inspection using computer vision, demand forecasting to manage your inventory, and even energy optimization to cut costs. Now, these solutions are easily accessible, or increasingly accessible, I should say, thanks to the way technology has developed over the past few years with the cloud-based platforms and how these can be rolled out to individual sites and small companies, as well as edge computing, which was a part of the barrier to entry just a few short years ago. Over time, this change has been significant, and you'll see that initially, AI adoption naturally was limited to larger enterprises with deep resources to essentially pilot and test. But today, modular AI tools and subscription as a service models allow more smaller manufacturers to start small, maybe even with one use case, and scale as they see the ROI coming. And this trend is towards some form of democratization of AI. So I'm sure we'll speak further on that in the panel. But just to share one statistic I came across in just preparing for this. One study had it that somewhere around 75% of SMEs are experimenting with AI. Now, 78% of those growing SMEs, they plan to increase AI investment in the next year or two. Now, the problem here is that SMEs still lag behind large manufacturers, according to the same study, in terms of advanced AI adoption, because most still remain in that pilot or early implementation stage. So this is where the use cases that will be more applicable and valuable to them on a small stage will probably be the ones that they will go with more regularly. And my go-to for that one is usually the quality control via computer vision, because that one, it doesn't require as much history prior to implementation, and very quickly you can develop what you need in terms of your images to support a very valuable use case for defect detection as well as defect identification.
Thank you, Carl. You've sort of helped us to transition into the next topic, which we're going to explore, and that is, where is the adoption actually occurring, and what are the use cases that are most ROI with companies, and who's winning and who's losing? I do want to really support, and I'll ask you the question, but we see the same thing in the small to middle-sized manufacturers that you just said. A very high use case is computer vision and AI. And in the past, as an example, our clients, they have operators inspecting for scratches, defects, and surface roughness. Yes. Now they can use a computer. So there are use cases, and also they are low cost. So that's really the question to kick this session off is, what is happening? Which use cases are really succeeding and have high ROI? And also, if you can see some challenges that is not a higher ROI, but it might be coming later. Could you help us with some examples?
Yeah. So if I just continue along those lines, and the topic for this panel is prescriptive AI. Now, just thinking that through, prescriptive AI is just one step above predictive, right? In that you have to be predictive in order to be prescriptive. It's moving beyond that first layer to find where the real value is, in that your insight and action is actually being provided to you by the system, right? So adoption is happening today primarily among those manufacturers who have already invested in some of the digital foundations. So you'll naturally see these in sectors like automotive, aerospace, advanced electronics. Those areas will typically lead the way, even in the small to mid-sized suppliers within those sectors. These companies are winning because they've connected their data across operations, and they've also built some trust in their AI-driven recommendations. Where we're failing, or where failure tend to occur, is that many organizations, even in SMEs, jump straight into AI without addressing data quality, governance, and change management. So prescriptive AI needs clean, contextualized data in general, and a willingness to act on the insights. So if leadership and frontline teams don't trust the recommendations coming from the systems, or if the processes aren't ready to adapt, the technology itself stalls. So I'd say, as far as the challenges are concerned, Michael, I'd say that's probably threefold. First being the data silos and the interoperability. So you'll find that given the fragmented systems that manufacturers have, it makes it hard to create that unified view for the prescriptive AI. The second one is around cultural resistance. As I alluded to just now, AI changes the decision-making dynamics, and that requires strong change management. The problem you have is that operators and managers, they don't trust AI automatically, right? And there's also a fear of job displacement, by the way. So there's also other motivations to not adapt to the system. And this slows adoption and therefore reduces the effectiveness of AI-driven decisions. The third one, in terms of a challenge, is around high upfront costs as well as ROI uncertainty. Struggling to quantify the benefits upfront before spending to some a significant amount of capital or investment, somehow it cripples pilots before they even start. So even with the SaaS models, software as a service models, SMEs still worry about the subscription costs. the implementation fees, as well as the unclear ROI timeline associated with these. And this hesitation to invest will lead to slow adoption typically, and it's compared to large enterprises, of course. And if I was to add a fourth challenge, I know I said three, but if I was to add a fourth just to close this off, I would include the lack of a skilled workforce. So you'll find that within the SME environment, they often lack in-house data scientists or AI engineers. And this leads them to an over-reliance on vendors and consultants to increase, which also increase costs, which was one of the other problems I mentioned earlier. And you'll find that prescriptive AI and these types of applications, they require not just deployment, but ongoing optimization skill. Now, all of that being said, the good thing is that over time, some of these barriers have been lowered and some of these challenges are being addressed by the solutions that are out there.
Thank you very much, Carl. You mentioned a lot of great benefits, but also the resistance. And one thing you mentioned was the concept of an in-house scientist, of some inside expertise. And I wanted to pivot to Jeff and sort of ask Jeff, how important is it to have someone inside, whether we call them a scientist or the AI leader, but a focal point inside the company to help guide, and any facts that you might have to bear upon that, Jeff?
Sure. It's a question that I've been asked many times is, should we have a chief AI officer in our company? And that's not a simple answer. And it depends on a lot of reasons. And that's what I think makes sense to go over. For some companies, absolutely. A chief AI officer or a person dedicated with the job of leading AI is essential. But for others, not yet, or maybe even not at all. It really comes down to a few things. First, you need to understand how central is AI to your product or your value proposition as a company. Whatever you make, whatever you provide, how central is AI tied to that? How aggressively do you plan to compete using AI is another thing that you should ask yourself. And how much risk or complexity your AI initiatives introduce across the business. So if AI is core to what you sell or how you differentiate, I would argue you need a chief AI officer. You need a dedicated person responsible for AI to provide clear ownership, governance, and strategic direction. But if you're primarily using AI for internal productivity gains or just, kind of existing things and making them better, then I would say an existing executive, a CIO, a CTO, a COO, it almost may not really matter, can oversee AI without creating a new kind of C-suite title or a new leader for it. But even companies without a chief AI officer should still assign explicit accountability. They should create a governance structure and ensure that someone is responsible for aligning AI efforts with a strategy. Because the worst option isn't not having a chief AI officer. It's treating AI as everyone's job, because that will quickly turn into no one's job. But what I recommend generally for most companies, big or small, is you should think of AI as completely infiltrating and guiding your company's business strategy. Instead of having it be a separate strategy, it should be part of your company's business strategy. It just may be such a big part that it does result in a dedicated role, but it shouldn't be thought of as just a separate strategy out there. So that's how I would answer the question, like, should you have a dedicated person to AI? Kind of depends on how you're going to use it, because this is the one technology that infiltrates every role at every level, at every industry, across every function. And there aren't that many technologies that can claim that.
Thank you very much. Pivoting to Karthik, sort of two areas expanding on that. We heard from both Carl and Jeff about some of the failure modes in terms of those things happening, and you've been quoted sometimes that many AI and IIoT projects fail, upwards over 90% in some cases. Do you see the same causes that were just described? And also, do you see the opposite side? Some best practices for adoption in the business and in your experience.
Thanks, Michael, for this question, and thanks, Jeff and Carl, to lead to this point. And just to pick on what Jeff mentioned, I think the accuracy, the ability to really have a sharp recommendations become critical. It builds trust. So if you're in the shop floor, if you're in the plant, you are a plant operations head or a maintenance head, you want to really have recommendations that you can trust. So just to add on to this point, what we have seen is we monitor about 25,000 assets with 120,000 monitoring points. What we realize is we get about 100,000 plus alerts every day, but the customers don't want alerts. And we filter them down to about 800 to 1,000, what I call them as critical points that require analysis through a machine learning algorithm. And from there, what we send to the customers is about 35 to 40 recommendations a day. And out of which 96% of them are being acknowledged by the customer. It is helping them to address with 99.9% accuracy. So which means we have less than 5% false positives and less than 0.03 or 0.01% false negatives. I think this builds the trust. It is very important when you are really trying to go ahead and build the confidence in the shop floor. Typically, the manufacturing process teams or conservative risk averse, they want to make sure that whatever they do it right. And something that helps them with peace of mind and something that they are confident that it will really produce the outcome that they are interested in. And what are the key things that we have seen which really makes the adoption fail? No clear business owner, and it gets juggled between the IT OT convergence. Who owns it? Is it IT? Is it plant? Is it digital teams? I think that's one area that I've seen a lot of customers really struggle with. And also dashboard syndrome. So if you kind of really say you build alerts, you have dashboards. Dashboards do not solve the problem, right? Dashboard doesn't run the missions. So you just need to really be careful when you're really dealing with the implementation that you don't get stuck with any of these issues. And the wrong commercial model, Carl mentioned about it. I think you need to make it easy to adopt, which means it should be really as a service, subscription models, and with a clear ROI. And for example, in Infinite Uptime, we have saved about 125,000 hours. If we were to put this in a context of process industries like steel, cement, paper and pulp, mining, and tires, we have seen that on an average of $30,000 to $50,000 of cost that they incur if they don't really run their operations, it translates to close to $4 to $5 billion of savings that we had been able to provide to our customers. We also say 3 to 6 months is a typical ROI when we implement any of our solutions to the customer plants. So it is about simple, established methodology of ROI is super critical when you want to really adopt at scale. And the last but not the least is about the cultural resistance. I think this is so important to really be overcome from the top management, recognizing the issue, and also make it as a maintenance assist or a process assist. I think that is going to really make the adoption a lot more easier. So what we have also seen in terms of what are the key things that really makes it tick is about clear business case and strong plant level ownership and closed loop execution, which means the customer acknowledging the issues that have been flagged is right or wrong. I think engaging them is super critical in closing the loop, and fast time to value, which means 3 to 6 months ROI, and a clear commercial construct, which is OPEX or subscription based, and along with operational change management provided with an executive wear cover. I think these are something which we have seen as critical success factors. And in summary, what we have seen, yes, I think a lot of AI and IoT projects fail, which is to do with weak ownership, lack of execution loop, and the wrong commercial model. And to really make it scaled, I think having clear ownership at the plant level with a clear business case and a closed loop action with fast ROI really makes it as a scalable and successful model.
Thank you, Karthik. So as we've been sort of talking now, just to pivot a little bit more and sort of talk about the smaller companies, and we've heard some of the reasons that they're slower maybe to adopt, but they still do. And so for those that do adopt, I'm not saying these are all of them, but in our market in Ohio, many times we see that they've already adopted uptime and machine monitoring, which 5 or 6 years ago was new, but now that's a subscription-based service, and they see that benefit. Now some are doing tool path where they automatically generate tool paths for their cutting machines, and some are actually trying to automate quoting. And in the market, I'm a little bit referring to job shops. There's a lot of job shops where they get a design. So as we think about these sort of small companies and medium companies, what type of AI is accessible for them so that they don't have to like write their own with ChatGPT or something? What subscription-based models are available or not available to them to help them? And what might be holding them back from finding some of those things? I'm going to sort of forward that question to Jeff.
Sure. So if you look at like, is AI more accessible to small to medium-sized companies instead of big companies? I don't know. And here's why. I've got some conflicting information, but potentially yes. So there's actually a study I really enjoyed that came out in 2024 that was produced by MIT and Microsoft. And there were 2 questions in the study that I found very interesting. What is the status of AI development within your company? And how suitable is your data for use with AI? And for both of these questions, they organized the answers by company size. 4 categories. They had more than 10 billion in revenue, 1 to 10 billion, 500 million to 999, and 100 to 499 million. So they didn't do under 100 million, but they had 100 to 499 million group. And when it came to AI development, the $10 billion plus companies were massively ahead of the small companies, with 77% in 2024 had already begun deploying use cases and 20% were experimenting. Whereas for the small companies, 4% were deploying, at least according to this study last year, and 52% were experimenting. Now, I bet if you asked it again this year, they all went up. But that's a massive difference, a 73% difference between the largest companies and the smallest companies in their study. But when you compare to the next question on data usability, the answer gets really interesting because it's essentially inverted. The smaller companies claimed a much higher percentage of data usability for AI. The smallest companies had significantly higher data usability, with over half of them saying more than half of their data was suitable. Whereas for the biggest companies, it was flipped. And this makes sense to me because the bigger your company, the more facilities you have, the more software systems, the more history you have, the more complexity you have. And you end up having a much bigger mess to connect all these systems, to connect all the data, to normalize it, to contextualize it. So although these bigger companies have applied much larger budgets and have the focus much more in the direction of AI, the smaller companies are actually more poised to take advantage of it quicker, faster, and more efficiently. We just need to get the small companies more focused on realizing you could do more faster. You're just kind of not choosing to. The bigger companies, it appears, have seen more value and are even willing to spend more to try and get ahead to move this monster in the right direction, rather than just small, easy wins that small and medium-sized manufacturers can do. Now, if you look at kind of the use cases that are out there, what's interesting is the World Economic Forum Lighthouse Program, which is an attempt to represent the best of the best of the best companies out there for doing Industry 4.0. They started around 2018, and now they're up to a whopping 201 sites. That's it in the world, the best of the best of the best. And they started with 16 in their first cohort. What's interesting is 2 things here. One is also you might think that, oh, this is the biggest and best companies that are on there. But not so. One of the first 16 companies was actually a small Italian manufacturer that only had around 200 employees or so. So yes, small can be successful. But then if you look over the course of the years since that started, AI was a small part of the use cases. And now it is more than half of all the use cases that are submitted by these companies when they claim to try and earn the Lighthouse designation. And the companies that are using AI are actually reporting the highest benefit. So it should be like an easy justification. I mean, everything from just this last, excuse me, 2025 cohort, they had 40% labor productivity improvement, 48% lead time improvement, 44% cycle time improvement, 28% energy consumption reduction, 41% reduction in quality defects. So the companies that are doing this are just reaping a lot of rewards. And I got one other stat for you that I think you might enjoy is McKinsey actually last year did a evaluation of the functions of companies that reported the biggest cost decrease using AI and productivity increase, or sorry, revenue increase. So two different opposite ends of the spectrum. They actually did this for all industries out there, and they organized it by functioning. So like marketing, legal, HR, manufacturing, and kind of going down the list. And if you didn't have manufacturing, you just kind of, that answer was skipped for you. But manufacturing won in both of those categories for highest cost reduction and highest revenue increase for companies, including the most amount of companies that reported a 20% or more cost reduction in their company. So the value is there, and it's especially there for manufacturers. And I would argue the small companies are more capable to take advantage of it quicker, because the biggest thing it depends on is your data readiness, and you have it more than other companies. So any of the platforms out there, you are more capable of taking advantage of it faster.
Jeff, I think that was incredible what you just shared, especially that when we work with small companies, their perception is that their data is noisy. Their perception is that, it's not good data. And to your point, what you just shared is the data is simpler and less complex, and probably their pilot integration can perhaps occur more quickly than a large company. Very important finding. Thank you. So pivoting to Karthik, envisioning that you're a small company, there's many different models that are out there for deployment, ranging CapEx, OpEx, all different sorts of things. And so what are your thoughts on, what are some more suitable options for SMEs and why?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Michael. I think it was very interesting to hear what Jeff was talking about. And just to build on that, what we have seen, there are customers who are large, have reported about 200% improvement in the throughput. This is a 20 million ton steel manufacturer. And there are companies which have seen 15% enhancement in their capacity utilization for one of the large tire manufacturer. And we have seen 75% improvement in mean time between failures and 30% reduction in maintenance cost. I think it is important that a lot of SMEs have an opportunity to take a leapfrog and leap of faith by moving from on-prem, and the complexities on large enterprises can easily be overcome with a SaaS and OpEx models. And we offer to most of our customers an OpEx model, which is a monthly fee per asset per plant, and no large upfront license or infrastructure cost, and cloud hosted, managed by us. And this is something which really fits well with the SMEs, and it also preserves a cash because they are not incurring something significant as a capex, and it can easily be done with a fast approval cycle and ROI that I talked about. And you can also scale up and down easily, and this can be treated as an operating expense. And I think this is an opportunity for SMEs to leapfrog, and they don't have a complexity of IT OT convergence, cybersecurity, and large challenges of multiple enterprise systems at play. I think this is a great opportunity for them to leapfrog, leveraging SaaS models and jumping the gun in the AI bandwagon.
Thank you, Karthik. With those, those great benefits and at the great opportunity at the small companies, because with the data, the question is going to pivot here to Carl. This is really an important one, and that is there's many solutions out on the marketplace right now, and most of those are obviously subscription. And the small manufacturer doesn't have a lot of time, the owner and his team, to sort of evaluate those things. And so how can they navigate? How can they vet them? How can they choose? And probably more importantly than that is how can they select a pilot that they can demonstrate an ROI and calculate what that investment might be. So can you offer some advice on how a small owner of a company can think about that process of selecting and getting a pilot established?
Yes, very important question. And I totally agree that there are tons of solutions out there on the market. So whether you're in the large enterprise space or small to medium sized space, there's just so many things that you're inundated with on a daily basis in terms of what's accessible and available for implementation, even in your environment and situation. So let me go back for a second to um, maybe a statistic that supports what Karthik and Jeff said earlier regarding failure rates, right? So the Harvard Business Review did some research, and I think this was in 2024. And it indicated that there was up to 80% failure rate for AI projects. And Wharton reported some 75% success when ROI metrics included productivity and throughput gains. Now, there's a reason why I bring this up, because, sorting through so many solutions that are out there, it can almost be a full-time job. Just trying to do that and to understand what is most applicable at any given point in time. And it can be a very daunting task for a small company and medium-sized company. So frankly, some of this advice that I'm about to share should apply to all manufacturers of all sizes, but certainly the SME will be keen on implementing these in a very careful manner. The first one is to focus on value, right? Not every shiny object is really something that you need in your plant or your company, right? And AI is very shiny. It glitters a lot, right? So you don't want to be chasing squirrels with a very limited budget. So you want to focus on value. What are the most relevant and important value drivers given your circumstance? And as I just shared, that Wharton study stating that there was a 75% success rate when those ROI metrics were focused on throughput and productivity, right? So that might be the first place to start to think through what will give you more throughput, what will make you more productive in your situation. The next thing that you want to do, especially as an SME, is evaluate what others are doing, right? An SME doesn't need to be the first or early adopter of any technology. In fact, they might be probably encouraged not to be the first or early adopter because they really don't have the R&D budgets and so forth and discretionary spend to manage in this way. Others have done a lot of the things that you'll try to do, and they've proven out what you're interested in accomplishing. The third thing is to really understand, truthfully, honestly, what your current state is. Cast your vision based on the value that I mentioned from step one, and architect your roadmap from now to next to beyond. So it's really taking that strategic view, not something that will just work in this time frame, but what will work in the next time frame and what will work in the beyond time frame. The reason why I'm bringing all of that up is because while this is all easier said than done, I would emphasize that at this point, that SMEs will often benefit from outside help from partners, especially in aiding the selection of technologies and developing this roadmap that I speak of that is truly strategic, benefiting from the partners' vast experiences along these lines and across sectors and so forth. It should also be noted that the SME will need to be very careful to avoid building disparate solutions along their journey that will not integrate well in the end, which will then result in mounting technical debt. So these are things to avoid. And I know, Michael, with your group, for example, and in your area, working with the small to medium-sized enterprises, and as a part of, the national infrastructure for supporting SMEs in this way. I'm sure you've probably seen the same things, but you want to make sure that you do those core things. Get the help that you need, especially up front, but think strategically, and then also make sure that you're focused on value.
Thank you, Carl. I actually do want to reinforce two things that I heard Carl say that do apply, I think, in all the markets, and especially in Ohio also. Number one is that we are a manufacturing community, and that's worldwide too. I know we have many worldwide people here. So in your immediate regions, wherever you are, talk to your colleagues, talk to your other manufacturers. I mean, AI and its use is not competition. If you have a spaghetti sauce manufacturer and you have somebody who makes metal parts, we want to bring up all manufacturing. Don't share your secret sauce, but talk about AI. And you may find right next door there's somebody that's using AI and can give you the best practices. But more importantly, as Carl said, you don't know what you don't know. And so therefore, reach out to someone to help you that does it for a living, and they can speed up your adoption cycle. Thank you so much for those comments. AI is coming, AI is already here. And if we don't do that, what's going to happen is we will fall behind, each of us as manufacturers. So as we come sort of to the last area for today, and sort of wrap up in a little bit, I want to sort of take a larger look at what's happening in terms of where's it all going. And we think about it, there's a human worker technology interface. Now it's a certain way, but in the future, 5-10 years from now, that is going to be different. So if we can talk about that a little bit, especially how that adapts to manufacturers. And I'm going to just sort of go around now and ask individuals to comment on how work itself will start to look different. And that's going to be natural. So first with Karthik, maybe you could comment on your views on labor, skill gaps, AI, tribal knowledge capture, because as we have now, at least in the United States, about 30% of the workforce is going to retire in the next 10 years. These are major trends. Could you, Karthik, talk about how AI can help with that in the next 5-10 years?
Sure. No, absolutely. Thanks, Michael, and thanks, Carl, for interesting observation that you talked about on the value. So, Mike, to answer your question, for many manufacturers, industrial AI is definitely moving from monitoring to prescriptive autonomy. And this is really going to help enable the workforce, and which is really going to benefit from what is going to happen on the industrial AI. It's not about just detecting the problems, but it's about automatically recommending the best action that need to be taken. So, which is going to save time, which is going to save energy, it's going to save significant cost and significant level of skills that is required for someone to implement. The second aspect is many plants are already operating at 30 to 40% fewer experienced technicians. And we always say, hey, where is going to be the most senior maintenance manager, Bob or Henry, that's going to be there for the future? So we don't see a lot of millennials and Gen Zs trying to be part of some of these roles. And how do you think you really need to address by adopting prescriptive AI, becoming a digital backbone? I think that compensates for the loss of tribal knowledge into algorithms and capturing decades of know-how that would otherwise retire with people that you mentioned. And the third important thing is we have an ambition to scale to 10,000 plus plants from 1,000 that we support today in the next 3 years. And this is possible through what we call them as a standardized, repeatable, a cloud-first deployment model and not doing it custom-based. I think this is going to really create something that can be scaled. Last but not the least, this is not about replacing humans. It will radically upgrade the roles, and leaders move away from lagging reports, reactive actions to real-time, commercially driven decisions. And this is going to really make them a lot more intelligent. And last but not the least, the biggest opportunity ahead is not just the technology adoption, it's a change management at scale. This is going to make manufacturers to realize a significant value. And to me, industrial AI is $1 trillion opportunity. If you look at 16 to 17 trillion that is spent on manufacturing today, more than $1 trillion is wasted in some form due to poor quality, due to lack of availability of equipment, supply chain issues, and skilled labor. I think this contributes to more than $1 trillion. So you can unlock the value of $1 trillion by way of integrating all of them at scale.
Thank you, Karthik. Expanding a little more, you talked about, Karthik just talked about the workforce trends and the skill gap, and I wanted to pivot to Carl. And if you could comment these prescriptive systems and other things, how will they change the work and how the work is done in the shop floor or in the offices. And there's a phrase that I know you use sometimes called human in the loop. And what is that part going to look like in the future? That a fundamental change.
Sure. And I think that's something that we can't um, uh, elaborate on too much in terms of there's going to be human in the loop anyway. I mean, there's a lot of fear around AI and what it's going to do in the environment. But let's consider what the trends are, right? For many years, Karthik mentioned this, and I think you might have as well, Michael, in your statement that there's some 30% expectation that 30% of the workforce will be leaving the manufacturing workforce and environment. Right. So there's that trend. So there's a requisite knowledge leaving the workforce. There's a brain drain in manufacturing taking place. From a skill standpoint, there's also a trend for less hands-on manufacturing expertise being in the environment. But on the flip side, there's also an increasing desire for technology usage in the manufacturing environment. Makes sense because you're getting younger workers into the workforce, etc. And this is what they're tending towards on their personal side. So from a technology standpoint, there's a growing market of offerings that enable what we call AI democratization within manufacturing. So that's where we think about low-code/no-code platforms that will help to empower SMEs and solve for some of what we spoke about earlier regarding in-house data science expertise, etc. So these are things that we see the trends shaping up for. So what SMEs should look forward to? They look forward to one, affordable, scalable AI solutions. So that's the SaaS-based prescriptive AI platforms that are becoming more accessible and reducing that upfront cost. Some even have pay-as-you-go and outcome-based pricing. So you're going to see more of those. The second thing you're going to see more of for the SME is that you'll have embedded AI in everyday tools. So as they upgrade to certain systems, your ERPs, your MES, your IoT platforms will increasingly include some of the built-in prescriptive AI capabilities. So automatically, they will be getting some of these things in the systems as they move on. The third thing that they have to look forward to is industry-specific prescriptive AI. So for specific industries like automotive, food processing, discrete manufacturing, there are certain solutions that are already tailored for those environments. So I'll just conclude in saying that there's a lot for SMEs to look forward to, and to embrace this future outcome, they will need to focus on some no regrets. One no regret will be workforce upskilling. You have to increase AI literacy, and that will become an essential for operators and managers. SMEs should plan training programs and leverage this human-in-the-loop governance that needs to take place if you're going to have low-code, no-code platforms. Then finally, they need to at least also engage in change management. So the cultural resistance that can derail projects, you need to prepare your workforce for transparent communication and pilot programs to build trust in these systems.
Thank you very much. That was very, very clear in terms of what needs to start to be thinking about to happen for results. So sort of our last thought as we sort of wrap up in just a moment, pivoting a little bit to Jeff, and if you could sort of share, building on what we just heard, how do you think that AI will make changes, not just to how we work as was described, but also who or what does the work? And how might we need to think about redesigning roles and workflows in manufacturing to accommodate that in the future?
It's a good question. I'm probably going to have a more provocative answer here because no one has any idea, in short, what this is going to do. This technology is so disruptive that it's hard to envision what life will be like 10 years from now. It's one of few, if any, technologies that, like I said earlier, impacts everyone, everywhere, across the world, in every industry, in every role, including us on this call. And what makes AI different than other massively disruptive technologies in last, let's just say, century, like electricity or the internet, or more recently, the cloud, those changed how we work. But AI is fundamentally different because for the first time itself, the technology itself can learn and adapt and make decisions. You have to remember, artificial intelligence is meant to replicate human intelligence by its design, which means it's just going to get better and better and better over time. And so the rate of progress isn't limited by human speed anymore. So companies need to shift how they think about this more than anything else. AI shouldn't be treated as a tool. It should be treated as a capability that needs to be integrated everywhere across everything. And I like to go to the analogy of when calculators came out. When handheld calculators first came out, there was a lot of resistance in the 70s and 80s to calculators being used in schools. A lot of teachers thought it was going to destroy mathematics, and mathematics would just be kind of useless and people wouldn't be able to do as much anymore. Now look at it in 2025 and go, it would be silly to not use a calculator if you're in engineering school. Silly. It would be the same thing with AI in just 10 years from now. You'll look back and go, I can't imagine performing my job without artificial intelligence. The question is where? Because AI not only changes, like I said, how we work, it changes what does the work, who does the work, and how we do the work. So the biggest thing you need to do is think about, how can I use this to help every part of what I do? And that starts with basic education. You as an individual need to educate yourself. As a company, you need to educate your employees, because once again, this is artificial intelligence. So the more creative you are, the better you're going to be able to use this particular tool. So get it in the hands of your people, educate them, and let them experiment for how they can use it to help make their job better, more effective, and more powerful than ever before.
If you all could please take a moment, the viewers, and rate this session. This is used to help with improving these events in the future. And also thank you very much to our speakers today with their great insights. Love to thank the sponsor for this session, Infinite Uptime. They make this possible for this great understanding. And as we sort of close this out right now, I heard some themes I'd like to share. Number one, artificial intelligence, AI is here, number one. Number two, it is accelerating in terms of its capabilities much faster than other technologies like IIoT, which took years to sort of come to fruition. This is happening faster. It's important enough to have an individual at each of the manufacturing companies watching it and managing it. And it's a huge cultural change and needs workforce upskilling. And it's here today, and it's a great way to improve competitiveness. Thank you all very much. That sort of concludes this session today. As you are aware, any questions that went into the Q&A and anything in the chat will be responded to. Thank you very much for your attendance today.
Thank you. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Carl. Thanks, Jeff.